And this was like a crossroads point for me. It was either give up completely or try and find a little bit of more of a fight. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. A number of people have been asking for my full recovery story, and I've been putting it off for a while because it was going to be quite a long video. But today I'm going to share with you the full timeline of my illness, including everything I've tried and the things that helped me recover. So if that sounds interesting for you, grab a drink and let's get started.
This is me at my worst when I was suffering from fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, hypothyroid and IBS. And this is my recovery story.
So I was pretty much sick from the day I was born. I was born with a dislocated hip. I suffered from colic and lots of skin disorders as a small child. I spent 9 out of 10 of the first years of my life in a copper, lead, zinc and silver mining town, as my dad was a miner. When I got to the age of 10, after a bout of chickenpox, I developed psoriasis. The foundation for health was not particularly strong from quite a young age. So my teens seemed to be okay, but when I hit university, I started to develop insomnia, fatigue, and I got lots of tests taken during that time. I was tested for Ross River virus, dengue fever, because I lived in the tropics. A bit later into my degree, and I started to develop digestive issues. And so from that point, I started following a gluten-free and dairy-free diet that I'd been given by a nutritionist that I'd seen. And life went on. I started a career, I travelled, and I did lots of things, but I never really felt particularly well. So around the age of 30, a relationship broke up for me. And this time I developed really bad constipation. And it became so bad that I ended up in A&E 3 times over the course of a 3-year period. During the time of the fishes, I also had very heavy periods, and I was found to be extremely anemic. And I think the culmination of the fishes and the fibroid and the heavy bleeding and the anemia, it all sort of came together with some work stress, and I had a breakdown. I ended up with anxiety and depression and spent a few weeks in a hospital for those things. So I recovered from the depression and the anxiety, and the fissure was gone, but I still had digestive issues. I still had constipation, I still had bloating, I still had cramping. So I made it my life's work to fix this. I went to countless specialists. If I didn't get the answer I was looking for from one gastroenterologist, I went to another one. I've had just about every bowel test that they can possibly do, including one where they put a balloon in your colon and blow it up. And yet the best I got from the diagnosis was that I had a slightly oversized colon. And then one other diagnosis was IBS, and I was put on antidepressants. So during my 30s, I also developed some other strange symptoms. My feet started to hurt. I remember a summer where I couldn't stand in the kitchen for longer than about 3 or 4 minutes because my feet would feel like they were on fire. I started to get a lot of stiffness in my neck and shoulders, particularly when I went to study for a master's. So I saw lots of orthopedic surgeons and physiotherapists for my neck and shoulders, and I went to a podiatrist for my feet. Some orthotics later, and my feet were sorted out. I was told that my feet were hypermobile. At this point, I don't have a diagnosis for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but that came later. So I was starting to feel like a bit of a hypochondriac. Every couple of months there was something new, some new pain, another new person to go and see. I went to an environmental health hospital in desperation because none of the gastroenterologists had managed to help me. And I'm one of these people who doesn't really take no for an answer. So if someone tells me that it's IBS and there's nothing that can be done I don't tend to believe them. It's kind of helped me. So I got tested there for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and he did all these bendy tests on me where I had to move all my fingers and kind of like party tricks. Well, things that I used to do as a kid, which everyone thought was quite funny, but I didn't realise it was actually a thing. I was quite excited after getting that diagnosis, and I got it confirmed by an orthopaedic surgeon who was a specialist in Ehlers-Danlos. I thought, finally, I've got a diagnosis that will be the beginning of a solution, but it just didn't work out that way. Under the guidance of the Environmental Health Hospital, I tried quite a few restrictive diets: high protein, high fat, low histamine, body ecology, a whole host of diets. And I was put on low dose immunotherapy, which I stayed on for about 5 years. In 2011, I was planning my wedding, and I went to the Environmental Health Hospital and I said, look, I want to feel really good. I don't want to have constipation. So they did some other tests and found that I had quite a lot of heavy metals in my system, which is not really a surprise when you think I grew up in a mining town. So they suggested oral chelation. This was one of probably the worst things that I ever did for my body. But things were about to get worse because getting ready for my wedding, I decided to have all of my amalgam fillings replaced with white ones. Something I'll regret to this day. And that was enough to take me into a bad place health-wise. The last day I actually felt relatively normal was on my wedding day. And on my honeymoon, things kind of went downhill. I started to feel more tired. My digestion got worse. Things just hit a really bad spot there. And then I returned to the UK for my honeymoon and I started a new job. Worked in that job for 4 years, and during that time I watched my health slowly but surely deteriorate further and further and further. So over the years that would follow, I'd spend my weeks working and my weekends sleeping. I'd rush home from work in the afternoon so that I could get to bed at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening. And that was pretty much my life. I felt so weak all the time. And yet I tried to act like nothing was happening. I still desperately was looking for a solution. I tried cutting my hours down to working 3 days a week, and I would sleep the other 2 days off, but that didn't make any difference. And I was going to the Environmental Health Hospital, and they told me that I needed to do my low dose immunotherapy, which was every 3 months, every month. And I was taking about £500 worth of supplements every month as well. And then all of a sudden, I started to develop lymphedema in my legs and putting on a lot of weight. And then other strange symptoms started to happen. Obviously, my pain got a lot worse. It had always bubbled in the background, and was getting physio maybe once a week, sometimes once a fortnight. But I was starting to need a lot of physio. And then my feet turned orange. I had lymphedema. Heels on my feet also cracked and the skin just would fall off. My legs started to feel really heavy. Started to develop insomnia and needing to pee every hour, every half hour in the night. So you can imagine I was pretty exhausted by this point. The brain fog had been there and I'd never really thought too hard about it. I just thought it was the way your brain worked, not remembering how my brain used to work. And that's the thing with brain fog, it tends to creep up on you very, very slowly. But when you start to not be able to find the words to say and you get lost in a conversation, and that was what was happening with me at work, and I was in quite a senior position, I eventually had to give it up. So once I stopped work, I started to get really desperate. I mean, I was already desperate. I lived for recovery. That's all I thought about. Everything was towards recovering my health. And I read about how if you get your amalgam fillings taken out and they're not done by a holistic dentist, it can cause you a host of health issues. And that one solution was to have the white fillings drilled again, the vapor removed, and then go through a detoxification process. I spent £3,500 with a dentist on Harley Street and went through that process. But the guy was getting investigated by the British Dental Association, and nobody told his patients. So when it came to him doing the restoration of my fillings, he made a complete mess of them. And so that set me up to a vicious cycle of more dentistry. I had infections in a tooth. I hadn't worked for quite some time at this point, and in a last-ditched attempt, I consulted a functional medicine doctor. She diagnosed me with hypothyroid and chronic fatigue. She tried me on bioidentical hormones and some thyroid support, as well as trying to get my nutrient status up because I was pretty low in all the key energy nutrients. And I ended up taking a lot of supplements. The thing with functional medicine is it can take a long time, but it's also incredibly expensive. And when I had that going on, I was spending so much money every couple of months to see her and to go through all the tests. But then I also had the dental bills to cover. And the dental work was just undermining anything that she was trying to do. So in the end, I ran out of money and I had to stop seeing her. And it was during that period when I stopped seeing her that my favourite uncle died. And that was kind of the rock bottom for me. Not only did my body seem to break even further, I mean, the fatigue just got ridiculously bad, but also I think my heart got broken because I'd not been able to see him because I'd been ill all that time. I started to gain more weight and I got really, really depressed. And this was like a crossroads point for me. It was either give up completely or try and find a little bit of more of a fight. And of course I chose to fight. And it wasn't easy because I really psychologically felt that I was stuck in this vicious cycle of dental visits. And every time I'd start to feel better, I had to go back to the dentist to get more work done. So I started to force myself to go outside, and I developed this habit of forcing myself to be outside 15 minutes a day in the park with the local squirrels and birds in that park. And so I took loads of food with me and I made friends with the animals. And I'd completely shut myself off from people. My marriage was not in a good place. My situation had made my husband incredibly depressed. And so we weren't really talking to each other. So the animals were my sanctuary. They didn't judge me. They accepted me as I was. And from doing that, I felt my mood lift and I got a renewed sense of wanting to keep going. And then a friend told me about Medical Medium. She'd read one of his books because she had a thyroid issue and she recommended it. So I got thyroid healing and I started pretty much immediately on the first month of the thyroid healing protocol. Reading those books was just so eye-opening, but it was like reading the story of my life. He's incredibly good at telling you that what you're experiencing is real, because I found myself, and I'm sure lots of other people with chronic illness, we start to really doubt our own sanity because no one else around us believes us. Or at least they can't comprehend that we could be going through such pain and torture. Is it humanly possible? So I took things really slowly, and for the first month I started to feel my energy coming back. I wasn't eating a lot of fruit. I was still incredibly afraid of fruit because of all of the fruit-free diets that I'd been on. And I got some help with my supplements eventually because I realised that I couldn't do it by myself. And that started to make a difference. I was still in a lot of pain and I was still very fatigued. But there was some hope there. And during this time, all of the minerals left my teeth. And I needed to keep going back to the dentist for fillings. I had one tooth which pretty much died from the inside. So at the beginning of this whole thing, I'd started with a mouthful of 4 fillings and I ended up with 9. And I developed a phobia of the dentist, which is kind of understandable. A friend of mine, another friend, actually recommended a book called The Biology of Belief. He'd helped his wife recover from stage 4 cancer. And this book, he said, was instrumental in making that happen. So I thought, I've got to get this book. So I devoured that book. And that led me to start a quest to read as many mind-body books as I could potentially get my hands on. And from all my reading, I'd realised that I'd been quite a highly strung person my whole life. And that actually I'd been operating with a nervous system that was in a state of hyperarousal. Held on to a lot of anger and resentment and lots of frustration around the illness and the way I'd been treated by the medical profession, but also grief about the life that I'd lost and everything that I'd wanted for my life and what I'd missed out on because of this constant search that I was on to get my health back. And it was these things that got me into EFT, and I started to work with a practitioner, and I worked through lots of childhood traumas and issues that I had, and I did lots of work by myself. It was kind of my thing. I'd spend hours doing it every day. And I found over time that a real sense of calm came over me. And I tried meditation before, but I could never stop that whirring in my brain. But EFT managed to do that. And EFT got me through the dental phobia so I could get through dental procedures without having that energy collapse afterwards. And over time, it took about a year of doing that and medical medium that things started to change for me. And I could feel my health coming back. And I remember a day in September in 2017 or 2018 when I thought, yes, this is it. I am better. And I was wrong. Although my nutrient status was great and my thyroid markers had normalized, I started to get these chronic headaches and fatigue, and the side of my face had swollen up. And that sent me into emotional freefall. I was so panicked and upset by that because I'd seen a glimpse of hope. I'd seen health returning to me, and it felt like it was being snatched away. And it would take me a year of going to dentists, ENTs, and a maxillofacial surgeon to find out that it was actually TMJ caused by the first dentist when he screwed my teeth up. I was told that my jaw joint had degenerated on the left and that both my discs had also moved, one which is completely smashed to pieces, and that the pain would probably always be like that. Well, by that point I'd become quite skeptical of what I was told by doctors. So I actually used EFT to actually calm myself down, and then I got some clarity, and I read some books and I studied TMJ as much as I could so I could understand what was going on. And so I went back to the surgeon who'd recommended a temporary operation, and I asked him, could I do some physio just to see if that works? And he said, I don't think it will, but you may as well try it. So the physio and the EFT together helped me to overcome my TMJ. And I enjoyed going back to the maxillofacial surgeon for a checkup to show him what I'd achieved. And he was quite surprised. It took about 6 months after that for me to recover my energy and that required a little bit more emotional work on my part. But when I did, I decided that I would get trained in EFT and NLP so that I could help other people going through what I had been through to find a path forward to recover their health. Because emotional health is a big part of the puzzle when it comes to healing and recovery. So today I'm now pain and fatigue free, and I still have a few skin issues. I had skin problems from almost birth and the psoriasis since I've been 10, but it's so much better than it used to be. So I know over time I will heal that. So I really hope that my story has given you some hope and shown you that even with a lifetime of illness and a diagnosis of something like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, you can actually live a decent life. You can recover, because I did. So please don't give up. And let me know your healing experiences. Sometimes just sharing them and getting them out there can lessen the load. And I love reading your comments and responding to them. It's really important that we have a dialogue about this. And if you're interested in learning more about EFT and how you might use it in your recovery, check out these 2 videos, or get in touch with me about working one-to-one. I have a new program that I'm just launching. It's a 12-week program. It's all about teaching you how to use EFT, but also enabling you to deal with some of the barriers to your recovery. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.